Russell asked me to do a 10 to 15-minute introduction to what is known as the One Belt, One Road. People talk about One Belt, One Road. In Chinese, 一带一路. And I just want to do a very brief introduction of what it is, what it's all about. But you see here, I don't say One Belt, One Road. The Belt and Road, because on the 23rd of September last year, there are 3 Chinese ministries who are in charge of this project. It's very much a China-initiated project. And the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Commerce, and what we call the National Development and Reform Commission, last year on the 23rd of September sent out a directive saying that from now on you don't call it One Belt, One Road, just call it the Belt and Road. So to be politically correct, this is now the Belt and Road. Although, in fact, the whole world has been saying One Belt, One Road since Xi Jinping brought up the concept of One Belt, One Road in September 2013 when he was visiting Kazakhstan. And then in October, when he was in Indonesia, then he talked about the One Belt, One Road as well. Now, what it is, let me show you the map. This is the map of One Belt, One Road. These are 2 initiatives put together to link Asia with Europe. The One Belt is the land belt. It's called the Silk Road Economic Belt. This goes from China, starting from Xi'an, all the way to Rotterdam and beyond into the United Kingdom. So that is the One Belt. The belt is on land. The One Road is what is called the 21st Century Maritime Row. So the road is actually on sea. It goes from China down to Southeast Asia, up to the Indian subcontinent, down to Sri Lanka, and then all the way to East Africa, and then back again through the Suez Canal into the Mediterranean, and then again into the heart of Europe. So One Belt, One Road covers 65 countries along the Silk Road Economic Belt, as well as the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road. It covers around 70% of the global population, about 55% of the global GDP, and about 75% of the known natural resources in the world. So across the Silk Road Economic Belt, then those are extremely rich minerals going on that way. But you know, before I go on, I must say one thing. The Silk Road was not built by the Chinese. The Silk Road was built about 20 centuries ago, 21 centuries ago to be exact. That was not built by the Chinese. Those grew organically along the route to take Chinese silk to India, to Persia, to Arabia, and then into the Roman Empire. So this time, Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road is very different from what the historic Silk Road was. The Maritime Silk Road was also about 2,000 years old when the Chinese started sailing down the Pacific and then the Indian Oceans to do trade. The original Silk Road was very much demand-driven, as you could see, because those towns grew organically, and traders would travel along the Silk Road to take silk to Europe. Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road is supply-driven, supply-push. Whether it would work or not, I would not know, but it's a very different concept from what happened 20 centuries ago, when the Belt and the Silk Road were very, very active corridors of trade. And I think the land Silk Road only started being less prominent around the 15th century, when the Ming Dynasty started sort of going against trade, going against international trade, and sort of fizzle off. But that is the idea of the One Belt, One Road. And what is this for? Why did Xi Jinping had this sort of initiative? It's to start with a grand vision. This is a very grand initiative. And the international media, when Xi Jinping started talking about this in 2013, and 2014 was a full year of international reporting on this, and someone said, oh, this is China's Marshall Plan. As you know, Marshall Plan was what the Americans brought to Europe after the Second World War. And the Chinese were very quick, and the foreign minister, Wang Yi, was very quick in coming out saying, no, this is no Marshall Plan. This is no Marshall Plan. Because with the Marshall Plan, there were political strings attached, in the sense that those countries where the Marshall Plan went all had to embrace Western liberal democracy, which is why the Marshall Plan never went into Eastern Europe. And that was also sort of the line where East and West in Europe got divided, where the Marshall Plan went. And the Chinese said another thing, the Marshall Plan actually stopped after 4 years. Whereas for China, the One Belt, One Road, the Communist Party wanted this to be completed by the 100th anniversary of the People's Republic. The PRC was established in 1949. So for the Chinese, this is going to go on for 3 decades because this is a huge area to be built up. And what has the how do we what is the financing going to? How much is it going to cost? And I'll come back to this later. But how would this building of a huge infrastructure be financed? Back in 2014, the Chinese government started initiating what is called the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, or AIIB in short. And originally, when China first started organizing this, only 21 countries in Asia signed up. So it was then an Asian initiative. China said, no, One Belt, One Road is for everyone. It's open to everyone, and regardless of your what sort of, whether you're a social democracy, a liberal democracy, dictatorship, feudal kingdom, whatever, come join us. And even if you're outside of the 2 belts, join us, which is why, as far off as a BVI, if we're interested here, we can join the program. This is the idea of openness of this. And the Chinese started what is called AIIB, and originally, as I mentioned, only 21 Asian countries joined. And then George Osborne, sometime I think in March 2015, said, no, the UK wants to join as well for its national interest. And Washington, D.C. came back very quickly and say, no, this is wrong. You are whatever to the Chinese. This is being too accommodating to the Chinese. And Osborne say, no, we are doing this for our own national interests. Because there is so much building and financing and trading that could happen along the One Belt, One Road. And the AIIB is the financing manifestation of the One Belt, One Road. So after the UK joined, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Denmark, most other European countries joined. So now AIIB is a $100 billion bank, just started business a few weeks ago, and that is only the initial capitalization. So it's going to be a very, very big institution that is there to finance infrastructure building in Asia. And then China started what is called the Silk Road Fund, which is wholly funded by the Chinese Foreign Exchange Reserve, and CIC, the Chinese Sovereign Fund, is $40 billion. And then we have the BRICS Bank. BRICS have, the 5 BRICS countries have started a new bank, which is now called the New Development Bank, with the headquarters in Shanghai. And each of the 5 BRICS countries, Russia, China, India, Brazil, and South Africa, each put in $10 billion to fund the bank. That is only the initial capitalization. And last week, something called China Insurance Investment Company Limited was set up. 27 Chinese insurance companies put in 1.2 billion RMB to finance the building of infrastructure in Asia, meaning One Belt, One Road. And that is supposed to reach about 300 billion RMB very soon. So there is money financing the One Belt, One Road, but far from being enough. Because the Asian Development Bank a few years back mentioned that 8.2 trillion US dollars are needed between 2010, so 6 years ago, to 2020 to finance all the infrastructure construction that is needed in Asia in order for the Asian countries to maintain their current rate of growth. So a lot of infrastructure has to be built in Asia, and One Belt, One Road is the initiative that is driving this. So One Belt, One Road, what is the content of One Belt, One Road? It's about connectivities to connect countries. One, in terms of policy. So to the Chinese, the one key objective to enable trade and to flow freely between Asia and Europe and elsewhere, if the One Belt, One Road gets beyond that, is for governments to coordinate their policies. Coordination meaning letting the other know, consulting on it, rather than being unconnected in policy making. So the first connectivity is in policy. The second, of course, what everyone could imagine will be infrastructure, building the roads, railroads, and ports that would be needed for the countries on the One Belt, One Road to develop and realize their full potentials. Third would be trade, facilitation. So customs would be simplified, and hopefully there'll be a flawless or seamless flow of goods and services across the countries that are covered by One Belt, One Road. Capital, that is very important. There will be free flow of capital across the One Belt, One Road countries, so that, and a lot has to be done in that direction to enable that free flow of capital to happen. And number 5 is hearts. With Chinese, pronouncements, there's always this thing about being human and touching the hearts of different people along the Silk Road. And China is giving out 10,000 scholarships to students along the One Belt, One Road, Belt and Road, for them to come to China to study and to exchange on cultures. Opportunities. These are Chinese outbound investment numbers, and with One Belt, One Road, the Chinese funding could then go into other parts of the world along One Belt, One Road to help finance projects. If I may, spend 2-3 minutes saying why is China doing this? Everyone would ask why is China doing this. One is honestly foreign relations, because China does want to feel that's what is called the Thucydides trap or something like that. When a country start becoming a major global power, then it will start feeling resistance from the existing. When there's an emerging power and there's an existing power, there's always this trap that it would fall into. And for the Chinese, they try not to fall into that trap. Although it's a growing power, it tries to be friendly and help other countries develop into world powers as well. And this is one very concrete way for doing this, by devoting capital into the development of other countries. Secondly, there's something that China has a lot in excess. One is called production capacity. One is called capital. So production capacity, you have, cement, steel, aluminum, and all sorts of products that are now in excess because the Chinese economy is slowing down. Even when it's not slowing down, China still have excess capacity in the production of almost all things under the sun. And it also has very strong capability in building infrastructure. About 2-3 years ago, when I checked, there are something like 250,000 Chinese in Africa, building dams, roads, railroads, whatever they are. So China has a lot of infrastructure building capability, and One Belt One Road is one way to export that capability across 65 countries. And so, and then what are the challenges to the success of this very grandiose 3-decade project? I would think the following will be the key ones. There are numerous challenges, and this is something like my 6th panel on the One Belt One Road. And most people, ask me, Carson, you are Chinese, you think this could be done? What do you think are the challenges? I would say the following would be the key ones. Number one, geopolitics. The United States had not been very supportive of this. The first time where some support had come would be last year in March, when some White House spokesman said, it's not such a bad thing, or something along those lines. So you would expect some geopolitical resistance from the dominant political power. The Japanese are totally against it, so the Japanese have not joined the AIIB. In fact, what the Japanese did, very soon after China started doing this, Premier Abe then said Japan will set up $110 billion Central Asia Investment Fund. AIIB is $100 billion, and Abe said, no, we'll form a Central Asia Investment Fund of $110 billion. So the Japanese are not in support of One Belt, One Road. One Belt, One Road, if we go back to the slide, would go, you could see that it cuts into the, cuts into Russia and cuts into what used to be part of the USSR. So although Moscow and Beijing are now very friendly because they have a common competitor in a way, I would not expect Russia to be very welcoming of an initiative like this where it goes, while being friendly. I don't think Russia will be very open to China building things across Central Asia and into other parts of the former USSR. India is a regional power. And what India has done, India has not come out to say that, they like One Belt, One Road because it helps India link up with other parts of Asia, East Africa, and Europe. What Premier Modi has done, he came up with something in 2014 called Project Mausam, which is the Indian version of the 21st century maritime Silk Road. That is the trade route that Indian traders used to go down Indian Ocean, etc., etc. So different countries have their own calculations as to whether they would embrace this or not. But geopolitics would be one key factor in determining the success of the One Belt, One Road or the Belt and Road. Secondly is what the Chinese call 3 evil forces, which is terrorism, separatism, and religious radicalism. And all these today with the Islamic State, you can imagine the so-called 3 evil forces creating some obstacle to the realization of the One Belt, One Road, and domestic politics as well. As the Chinese have learned in Sri Lanka, there was the former president then signed up for the building of not only the port, but also the waterfront in Colombo. And when came the next January election, which was last year, a new president came up, and then the plan was scrapped. Now it's all back, because then the president was in Beijing, and after a while, now the project is back. But changes in domestic politics could very much affect this very grandiose project as well. And then another factor will be distance to market. In Central Asia, Kazakhstan is the 7th, you can see Kazakhstan there, is the 7th largest country in the world by way of land area. but there are less than 18 million people in that very large country. So on average, you have 6 individuals per square kilometer. And if you build infrastructure across countries where there's very sparse population, then the return is still going to take a long time before you can get your money back. And infrastructure building, even within China, China builds so much infrastructure, and now it has the world's largest, longest high-speed railway mileage, for example, and highways next to the United States. Even in China, where there's so much infrastructure building, where there's such a dense population, infrastructure is hardly a profitable business. And imagine building infrastructure across sparsely populated countries, then the economic returns to that endeavor could be quite challenging as well. So do you want me to stop now? Russell, I'm at your beck and call.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Certainly.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Not to cut you off in any way, but we'll continue the discussion as we go. But I wanted Carson to set the stage for this initiative. It's much like the TPP we talked about this morning. Mm-hmm. And Carson, while you talk, there's a lot of government money. I'm sure the private money that also is going to be involved in this. Yes. And the logic, again, is very simple. Are they going to be using BVI? Should we position ourselves to use BVI structures? They know them already, and to the extent that they are using them, by jolly, our economy can keep moving too.
That's right.
Good. I wanted to thank everybody for coming and for giving Carson the opportunity to speak. We have Carmel Martin in addition to, Carson is very modest. He is not only a very good friend of the BVI, but he's quite influential. So if you see him being very modest, don't take it that way. He is quite influential in his own way. Carmel is filling in for Neera from the Center for American Progress. Remember a couple of years ago we had Neera Tanden. We were very pleased to have her, and we were pleased to have Carmel today. I think the Democrats and Hillary probably told Neera she can't be going to the Caribbean in the middle of Donald Trump attacking me. So needless to say, she couldn't make it, but do give her regards. Robert Greaves is an American, a transplant, if I can say that, Robert, who is quite knowledgeable and a professional journalist in his earlier life, and some of the very leading publications in the world, Economist and FT and others, and now operates in a private capacity in Hong Kong in terms of public relations and strategic planning and visioning and all that stuff. I particularly wanted to have him so he can talk to us a little bit about messaging as it relates to Asia, because it tends to be a little bit different than our traditional approaches in the US and Europe. And Mehdi is also from Washington, a specialist, and I hope he can talk to us a little bit about some of the things going on in the Middle East and making sense of what's going on. I'm sure by the end of the day, we will probably be more educated than Carson was before he got into trouble with Damascus. Having said that, I want us to start off, though, the conversation, probably picking up a little bit from what Carson presented. Carmel, to the extent that you want to say yea and nay on some of the things that Carson said, is the U.S. totally against this idea? I know there's been no official pronouncements that I'm aware of, but what's your sense, if there is a sense, as to where they stand on this initiative, or perhaps the AAIB?
Well, I think I wouldn't say they're opposed to the initiative. Yeah. I think there were concerns about the AIIB, but I think at this point we have moved to a more supportive posture. And I think the concern is just to ensure that existing relationships in Asia are not disturbed by the new initiative, but appreciate the desire to create greater interconnectedness in terms of the global economy.
A couple of years ago, well, not a couple, probably 2 or 3 years ago, we all remember Obama with his pivot to Asia, although he's never really, seemingly every time he tries to do something, he gets called back to another troubles in elsewhere part of the world. And there's obviously a good rivalry going on there. Asia is terribly important. It's huge, and the U.S. is uniquely positioned, actually. It's both an Atlantic nation and a Pacific nation, so I'm sure those tensions are going to continue.